This is Marilyn Fidmont with the Good Shepherd Christian Church in Houston, Texas. We are continuing our series of sermons following the resurrection of Jesus Christ as he appeared to his disciples. In the Gospel of John, he has 4 different appearances, and we're going to be reading from chapter 21, verses 15 and following. Hear these words. When they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" He said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." He said to him, "Feed my lambs." A second time he said to him, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" He said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." He said to him, "Tend my sheep." He said to him the third time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter was grieved because he said to him the third time, "Do you love me?" And he said to him, "Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you." And Jesus said to him, "Feed my sheep. Truly, truly, I say to you, when you were young, you girded yourself and walked where you would. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and another will gird you and carry you where you do not wish to go." This is the word of God for the people of God, and we give praise to God for his words. We're picking up this message at a point in which Jesus had called the disciples into a new purpose. He'd met them at the seashore, had provided them with breakfast. They had been fishing all night, hadn't caught anything, and Jesus tells them to cast the net on the other side. Peter rushes to the shore, and Jesus has prepared breakfast. They participate in that meal by putting their fish on the fire and recognizing that Jesus requires of them to be fishers of humanity, just as he had required in the first place. So as they had settled into that comfort, you know how it is when you get real comfortable after you've had a meal with family, and yet there is a tension that's still thick in the air. They were settling in, but there were conversations that still had to be held. Peter, no doubt, still wanting to be close to Jesus, and yet wasn't exactly sure when they were going to discuss this little problem that they had. Major problem, truthfully. But all of us can recall a time in which we had done something that was offensive. We had not acted our best. We had not behaved and lived out the best of who we are and had the potential to be. We have disappointed the person we loved and cared about the most. How do we make that right? How do we put it back together? One of my favorite movies is one of those that is almost a cult favorite, Back to the Future, with that DeLorean car. And they had to go back in order to move forward. Do you remember they had to resolve all those things in the past in order to move forward? Jesus is going to take Peter back in order to move forward. You remember Peter was one of the disciples that was so tenacious of spirit, who was so confident about his role and relationship with Jesus. Peter the rock. Peter is the one who said, "Thou art the Christ." When Jesus said, "What are people saying about me?" Peter just blurted it out. "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." He said it. He made this bold profession of faith. So bold that Jesus said to him, "You are the rock, Petra, and on that I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it." That's really getting your name written in eternity. This is that Peter. The Peter that in Vatican isn't it St. Peter's Basilica? Peter had a place, except Peter had a bad moment. And it's easy for us to point to Peter and say, how did he deny Jesus? But haven't we all? Haven't we all, to some extent or another, denied who Jesus is in our lives? When we've not been the best of who we are, when we've not been kind and compassionate and considerate, when we've not extended ourselves as we should, haven't we denied who Jesus is? It's not just Peter when a mob scene carried Jesus away to put him on trial and march him up a hill and crucify him. Maybe we haven't done it that way, but we have done it. We've withheld the best of who we are. We've not tried hard enough. We've not been kind enough, patient enough. Oh yeah, we've denied Jesus. So they sit here after breakfast, and Peter is aware, just like any of us can be aware when we have a friend, family member, a co-worker, whoever it may be, when we know there's been a break, and a break that is egregious enough that we need to address it and we don't know how. Peter isn't asked the question by Jesus, why did you do that? Jesus had already forecasted. He said, you're going to deny me 3 times before the cock crows. You're going to do that. You will deny 3 times who I am. And Peter did deny it. Denied that relationship. That's not what Peter is asked by Jesus. He's asked, as they're having that meal, that fish, that tangible meal of their night of service and fishing. They're eating together, and as they finished up, Jesus looks at these fish and he says to Peter, Peter, do you love me? And he says, do you love me more than these? He's saying, do you love me more than these fish, more than these resources and assets that say that you are a fisherman? Do you love me more than your work and your income and your livelihood? Do you love me more than this? Peter says yes, and Jesus says, feed my lambs. Peter probably thought, okay, we're back. Jesus is not done yet. And he asked him a second time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And Peter answers, and it seems good, and Peter's hoping we're done. It's like when you're getting a lecture or reprimand from your parents, and you hope, okay, this is done, we're done. And he says, tend my sheep. And then he asked him a third time. And it's interesting to me that he always says, Simon, son of John. He always connects Peter's lineage to his dad. You know, he gives Peter personhood. You know, he acknowledges who you are, son of John. He acknowledges who Peter is. And then a third time he asks him this, and he says, Lord, you know everything. Peter now has been, shall we say, taken apart, laid bare, open and unhindered. He cannot put up another struggle or fight. His soul is laid bare before Jesus, and he knows how badly he had messed up. And now all he wants to do is, please, Jesus, help me make this right. You know everything, Lord. And as bad as this is, and bad as it was, you know I love you. And he says to Peter, feed my sheep. 3 times he gives Peter an assignment. 3 times. It's almost as if it's a trinity of forgiveness in which he allows Peter to know that you are still someone, even though you may have messed up, you are still someone that I can use. Because when Jesus has identified your usefulness, he always calls you back to it. He reminds me of a story that Alice Walker talked about when she was in South Africa, and there's a tribe there who had this interesting ritual. When someone has broken custom, they've done something offensive, they've done something that causes discord within the community. They've broken protocol, they've acted badly. And the whole tribe gathers around that person. They put the person in the center of the circle, and each one of them begins to speak to that person, not about what they did wrong, but who they are in their right form. They speak to them the best of who they are. Any recollection that they have of this person doing what was good and worthy and noble, they speak to it. They take turns, and everyone speaks everything they can remember. And by doing that, they bring the person back into wholeness. They reclaim the person to the best of who they are, not the worst of what they've been in one offense. Jesus, without identifying the offense, is putting Peter back together. He is surrounding him in a circle of love that says, you are still valuable. Peter, tend my sheep. Feed my sheep. Tend my sheep. Peter, I'm putting you back together. You are going to be redeemed, and through my blood, through my promises, you have been redeemed. Now we're going back to where you were when you proclaimed who I am. We're going back to where we were when you went with me side by side, when we were there on the Mount of Transfiguration. We're going back to that time, Peter, and we're going to start from there, moving forward so that you can live and be who I proclaimed and taught you to be. Sometimes all of us need to go back so we can go into our future, because this is the same Peter. Once Jesus has gone through this exercise with him, this is the same Peter that shows up on the day of Pentecost. Not the fisherman Peter, but the preaching Peter. That's what Jesus is doing. He's transforming Peter into something else. And we know how we look at these text commentators, research this, and they talk about how Peter moved into this full-scale agape love of Jesus. The first time they said, Peter answered, when he answered Jesus, he's answering as, as kind of a filial, a brotherly love. We also know that there's an eros love, which we think of as a romantic love. But the love Jesus wanted from Peter was an agape love. A love that says, I will lay down my life for my brother and for my friends. Jesus wanted Peter to be reminded that he was to love just as he had been loved. This is the love Jesus is offering and has extended to us. That love that says, I will go the last mile with you. And I'll keep going back to get you towards a future. And you haven't messed up so badly that you can't be redeemed. That's what we are learning here as Peter answers these questions. We all have to ask them of ourselves. We have to ask, do we love him enough? Will we tend the lambs and the sheep? Will we provide for them? Jesus wants us to love him with that all-out love, that open and unhindered love, the love that says, I will go further than what I think I can. Do you love me more than these? More than your fish and your stuff and your power and your privilege and prestige? Do you love me more than that? Then if you do, feed my lambs, tend my sheep. Let us love as Jesus has loved. Let us live in the forgiveness that he provides. Let's follow and see what the end's going to be. Do you love me? We pray, oh God, that we do, as you have loved us. Amen.